Okay, so this happened a few years ago when I was 12 years old. I have a twin sister and another sister that was 10 at the time. We were in a family vacation in Orlando, and we were staying in a hotel that was minutes from downtown Disney. After having spent the day at Magic Kingdom, we went to downtown Disney, where many elevators were located. We took one. It was around 11 p.m., and this weird guy comes in with a creepy smile on his face. Immediately, my dad tenses up and looks at my mom, who also felt that something was wrong with him for a reason. The guy looks at my younger sister and asks her by her name how was her day and if she liked chocolate. When asked how he knew this, he answered that he overheard our conversation and wanted to be friendly. Weird, but no big deal. Afterwards, we start going back to our hotel and this guy keeps following us, offering us food, drinks, even wanting to offer us a ride to one of the best restaurants in town. And then my dad told him to screw off, but he wouldn't go. At the next street, we waited for the light to turn red and crossed the street running, hoping to leave him behind us. But the guy kept following us. We saw that he took his phone out, called someone, and 5 minutes later, I realized that a car was now following us. My dad is starting to talk about fighting him, but then we reached the hotel finally. Well, not so much. It turns out the guy had a room in our hotel too, and he started to ask us in an almost imploring way to go to his room, that he had cake and he would even pay us if we would come. We then called the security, and while they were verifying the man's identity, we went the heck away to our room. We never saw the man again, but dang, I just can't imagine what would have happened if we went, and what his intentions were. This is quite possibly the stupidest thing that I've ever done in my life. Early 2000s, I was in my late teens and was on my way to meet up with a coworker, Chris, to watch a movie at his apartment. I had been to his apartment once before. It was one of those huge apartment complexes where every single building looks the same. It was set out in a big rectangle, with a field up against it, meaning that there really wasn't any way to differentiate the buildings, except for numbers on them that were only visible during the day. I remembered that the last time I had been there, I had parked next to a huge boat. So I looked for a huge boat and I parked by it again. I texted him to let him know that I was on my way up, and then I went up to the second floor. I didn't bother checking the apartment number, and I banged on the door really hard, yelling, "Open up," in a deep voice. The door cracked open and all I saw was a half a face peeking out at me. Loud music was thumping and the whole apartment looked dark inside. "What do you want?" the guy mumbled. I never even considered that this was the wrong apartment, but I knew Chris had a roommate, and I hadn't met the guy yet, so derp, I thought this was him. I'm here for Chris," I said. "Who?" the guy asked. And then the door opened all the way, and another guy grabbed my arm. "He's right back here," he said, and he pulled me into the apartment. The music was really loud, and the whole place smelled. The lights were out, with a few strobe lights blinking here and there. I just remembered thinking, this doesn't look like his apartment. Did he move some furniture around? The guy who had pulled me into the apartment wouldn't let go of my arm, and he began pulling me towards the back. He grabbed a cup and tried to give it to me, but I wouldn't take it. The place was packed, and everywhere I looked, people were either shooting up or lighting up or snorting up. I was pretty sheltered at the time, so it felt like walking into a movie set. It just didn't feel real. When we had passed the first bedroom, one of the rooms, I saw a group of people sitting around a blacklight doing God knows what. writhing around, dancing, but I smelled blood at that point. The guy was still trying to drag me to what I assumed was the back bedroom, and that's when it hit me. This is the wrong apartment. I'm exceptionally slow-witted, it appears. I pulled my arm out of the guy's grasp, but had no idea what to do. I knew if I had panicked, bad things would definitely happen. In a split-second decision, I did what I do best. Acted dumb. Oh goodness, you know what? This is the wrong apartment, I said in the most cheerful voice. I started to leave, but the guy kept pulling me back. It's cool, was all that he would say. Stay. I kept pulling myself away and telling him that I had a friend waiting for me, that I'm so sorry to have bothered him, and it looks like a great party, but I had to go. I tried to keep it lighthearted and not, vomit on myself in panic. My phone started buzzing in my hand, and when that happened, he started trying to grab it from me, all the while telling me to stay. You're here, now have a good time, he said, trying to pry my phone out by death grip. And the scary thing about it was that he didn't yell. He didn't speak aggressively at all, though his actions were terrifying. I finally made it to the door and I managed to open it. He gave up, but another guy stepped out and followed me. When I tried to go down the stairs, he blocked the way. Why you gotta be rude? He was slurring and weaving around, obviously hammered. I apologized and said that I had to go. My friend was waiting for me. I held up my buzzing phone to show him. It was then that I noticed blood dripping onto the ground in front of him. When I looked to see where it was coming from, I saw that he had blood-soaked paper towels wrapped around his hand. What happened? I don't know why I kept this conversation going. I just wanted out. I'm an idiot. He just shrugged, held up his bloody hand and said in the most nonchalant voice I've ever heard, "I got shot." Why don't you go to the hospital? I asked, and immediately regretted it, because he looked at me like I was stupid, which in fairness he wasn't wrong. Give me your number. You can come over here next time. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. I thought about giving him a fake one, but I wasn't about to push my luck. As soon as he got the digits, he called to make sure my phone would ring. He was satisfied when he saw it ring, and only then did he let me go down the stairs. I fled to my truck shaking. After a few moments, I called Chris and asked him where his apartment was. And when he told me, I looked at the buildings and could just make out that I was one building off. I had the floor and apartment location right, just not the building. I made it up to his apartment, looking behind me the whole time, and told him what had happened. At that point, I was trying not to get weepy. He helped a lot because when I finished telling him what had happened, he laughed at me. That was stupid, which it was, but at the time, it just made me mad. So I went home in a huff. We didn't hang out much after that. I know I keep throwing in there how stupid I was. I can't emphasize this enough. This was completely my fault for not being aware. It could have been completely avoided had I just used my brain. It was sheer luck that something worse didn't happen that night. The guy did call me several times and I never answered. He gave up after a while, but I changed my number just to be safe. I never saw him again. I hope he eventually got medical attention. Several years ago, when I was 25, I lived with, at the time, one of my best friends. Our friendship eventually started to dwindle, as it usually goes when you move in with a good friend, so she was rarely home. This night, however, she ended up staying at her place, heading to bed early. I was a server at the time, so I stayed up pretty late, usually watching YouTube and smoking pot. This night was no different than any other, except for the fact that my neighbors had tried to kidnap me. I'll go ahead and give some background info on my house and my neighbors. We lived in a 3-bedroom house with 2 bedrooms and the kitchen facing the crazy neighbors. They were a younger couple living in a smaller mill house. They were constantly coming out to our door asking for handouts. Now normally, I would be happy to help out a neighbor, but they would come over and ask for crazy stuff, like us to fill up an old Mountain Dew bottle with water, because theirs got shut off, beer, and once literally to ask for a single dollar. They would constantly be knocking at our door to ask for help, and when we wouldn't answer, I'd peek through the window to see them either jacking cigarette butts from the ashtray or pressing their eyeballs against the door people to see if they could spot us. Anyway, there I was smoking some weed and watching YouTube on my couch when I heard a knock at the door. I rolled my eyes because I knew exactly who was knocking. It was 11 p.m. I checked the people and sure enough, the boyfriend was on my porch. Normally, I would just walk away and continue with my life, but he looked like he was in distress. I opened the door up to see what was up. Hey, I just wanted to come over here and see if you would film my engagement. I got my girlfriend a ring here in my pocket and I need you to follow me to my backyard and film it for me. Baffled but curious, I told him congrats and that I would be out in a second. I just needed to put shoes on. I shut the door behind me and locked it. And quickly, I ran to the back room that looked out into their backyard. I peeked through the blinds to see the setup. Nothing. Pitch black darkness. No signs of decorations or anything like that. Naturally, I woke my roommate up and told her what was going on. Yeah, forget that, she said to me. And we both walked back up to the door after the boyfriend had started banging on it. I looked through the people again. I couldn't see anything and was confused all the way up until he pulled his eyeball away from the people. I quickly turned around and put my back up against the door. My roommate came running back to the door from her room, manning 2 wire hangers for protection. We both clung onto the hangers and sat up against the door until he finally left. We were so freaked out, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't overreacting. We went out to our back door and hopped into her car so we could do a drive-by. They always had their front door open and also didn't have any blinds, so it was easy to see inside of their house. Slowly, we crept by in her car and peered into the living room. Sitting on the couch and all, staring at the wall, they looked strung out. It was the couple and an older man. We sped off and ended up staying at a friend's house that night. I never answered the door for either of them again. One day I came home from work and an older lady was parked in their driveway. She walked up to me and got out of the car and asked if I knew where the neighbors were. I told her that I hadn't seen them for a while and she informed me that she was the owner. She told me that they were months late on rent and finally came to evict them. She entered the home to find it completely trashed, needles and garbage everywhere, holes in the wall, and literal crap on the floor. I told her that I was sorry to hear that she had to deal with all that, but I was happy that they were finally gone. I'm not 100% sure what was going on that night, but I'm glad I didn't follow him into the backyard. This happened a long time ago. I'm guessing back in 2006. And I can't have been older than 4 years old at the time, yet I vividly remember the fear I felt during this encounter. It was an early summer morning and the sun was up, but few people were out. In fact, these streets were practically dead that morning. My mom decided to take my sister, only 1 year old at the time, seated in a stroller, and I, to throw away some garbage at the garbage station. I might add that the garbage station is kind of secluded from nearby houses, bordering one of those deep, dark forests of eastern Sweden. Since I was only 4 when this happened, the memories from the incident had faded a lot. However, my mom remembers all of it. She says that upon entering the station, she immediately got an eerie feeling of being watched. I remember that feeling too. I felt creeped out, even though I didn't know why I was scared. I guess I could sense my mom's fear. Walking along that secluded garbage station, my mom suddenly stopped and told me this. Hold onto the stroller as hard as you can and don't let go, no matter what. That's my most vivid memory I have of this, and I don't think I'll ever forget those words. I'll at least never forget how they made me feel. It was as if my blood had turned to ice. I just froze. My mom sounded stern, but even a toddler can sense when someone's scared out of their mind. My mom was definitely afraid of something. The rest is just a blur. I don't remember much apart from the aforementioned, so I'll let the rest of the story be told from the perspective of my mother. This is the recollection of her experience, recalled to the best of my abilities, but in my own words. Not far from where we were standing, a truck was parked with a man seated in the front. Nothing unusual. A lot of truck drivers stopped to rest by the side of the road. But this man was staring, and he wouldn't stop staring. He stared right at me, examining my body with the determined gaze of a predator. Gluing the 3 of us in his sight, he truly seemed pleased by the fear he had instilled on our faces. And his eyes, they were something else, almost as if they didn't belong to a human, but rather to a predator on the savannah. I felt like prey, stuck in the claws of a lion, and I couldn't move. And that's when he smiled at me. I remember that dead smile, those cold, calculating eyes, and the way that he licked his lips, almost as if to say, I could kill you all if I wanted to. I believed this was the point in time, into this strange encounter, when my mom told me to hold on to the stroller, to hold on tightly and not let go. My mom is a small woman, 160 centimeters, weighing only about 48 kilograms, and she could easily have been overpowered by the overweight man in the truck. My mom later admitted she was afraid he would jump out of the truck and knock her out, possibly assaulting her, or even taking me and my younger sister. We bolted out of there. We didn't throw away much garbage that morning. We just turned around and walked home as quickly as my mom could do with a stroller and a 4-year-old toddler at her side. We never talked about what happened that day, up until very recently. The incident has always lingered somewhere in the back of my mind, as that weird thing that happened when I was a kid. And every time I walk past that garbage station, I get a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. As previously mentioned, this happened around 2006. Fast forward to 2008. The face of a 10-year-old little girl called Engla was printed across the front page of every newspaper in sight. She had been kidnapped and murdered, and the perpetrator was an overweight truck driver named Anders Öklund, now known as one of Sweden's most infamous killers. Anders Öklund was charged with the murder of Engla, alongside the murder of a woman named Pernilla. And he's also suspected of abducting another little girl who's still currently missing, making him more than one thing. My mom says that when she saw Öklund's picture in the paper, when she saw those cold, familiar eyes, she knew that he was the creepy man from the garbage station that early morning all those years ago. Thinking how my mom or my sister or me, or all of us could have been his victims, that sends chills up my spine. Anders, even though you're behind bars, let's never meet again.